Tonight, an exclusive conversation with Nelson Mandela at an historic time in his life and in the life of his country. Nelson Mandela is president of the African National Congress. Despite being imprisoned for 27 years, he never wavered in his quest for democracy in South Africa and political power for his people. He became an international symbol of the oppression of apartheid. Since his release in 1990, he has continued to be a key player in the struggle for political change. Last week, he saw South Africa move closer to achieving his goals and democracy. The South African Parliament has made the first step towards power sharing with a black African majority. With that in place, Nelson Mandela addressed the United Nations on Friday and called for an end to nearly a decade of economic sanctions. We're very pleased to have Dr. Mandela join us for this hour of conversation about the future of his country. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Characterize for me, if you will, this moment in the history of South Africa.
It is a very exciting moment because over the last 3 years, we have made what we regard as impressive achievements. Two of these we consider to be a breakthrough. That is the installation of a transitional executive council, which is going to prepare for the forthcoming elections and to ensure that they are free and fair, that each political party will have equal opportunity with all the others. The second important achievement has been the setting of a date for elections in April next year.
April 27.
April 27 next year. As we have pointed out before, that is not just a date when people will vote for a government of their own choice. It is, in fact, a date of liberation. That progress has made it possible for us to review sanctions and to call for their lifting. We are tremendously impressed by the response of the entire world. The United States of America, from the President right through the Senate and the House of Representatives, to men and women in the street. By Canada, Britain, that is the whole Commonwealth of Nations, by the EC, by the Organization of African Unity, by the United Nations Organization, by practically the whole world.
Couple of questions. One, would this day have been possible without sanctions? This soon?
Well, it is difficult to say. All that I can tell you is that sanctions were an important, if not a crucial weapon in the hands of those who are committed to see democratic values upheld throughout the world.
Sanctions work as far as you're concerned.
That is what I'm saying. I say they were a crucial weapon in the hands of all those who are committed to democratic values. And I believe that the progress that we have made is due in large measure to the pressure applied by the international community, and sanctions represented the most formidable form of pressure on our country.
One demand that is being made, and there have been some meetings on this, is the Afrikaners asking for a homeland.
We have rejected any ethnic solution. We rejected the Bantustan policy precisely because it was ethnically motivated, and we rejected it.
It'll never...
We have now succeeded in getting all the homelands to agree to rejoin South Africa and be part and parcel of a country which is organized not on the basis of ethnicity. And therefore we have rejected the demand by the Afrikaners, by a section of the Afrikaners, for an Afrikaner homeland. Nevertheless, we have decided to compromise. We have said to them, don't put forward this demand because we will reject it without compromise. But we are keen to meet you. All that you need is to give us a map of the area where you want to settle. We are considering the question of regions. We are prepared to accommodate you within that plan. But it must be an area where not only your people are going to be stationed, but any other group that wants to settle there should be free to do so and to enjoy full rights of citizenship.
And what do you think their response will be?
It is no longer a question of speculation. We know what their response is. On Monday, the national chairperson of the African National Congress, Comrade Thabo Mbeki, who is also the head of our Department of International Affairs, issued a statement together with General Constant Viljoen, the former head of the South African Defence Force and the leader of the right wing, that is the Afrikaner Volksfront, People's Front. They issued a statement which is based on the acceptance of the principle that the problems of the country must be settled through peaceful negotiations.
Therefore, you believe that civil war is not likely and will not happen in South Africa?
We do not want it to be simplistic, because the right wing itself is a collection of a number of small parties, some of which are moderate, others extreme. We believe, however, that Constant Viljoen, General Constant Viljoen, exercises a major influence on all these parties, and that to work with him and to explore a peaceful solution will neutralize those who are thinking in terms of civil war.
And you believe that he doesn't want it, and he is a man of his word, and he can be trusted?
He has made that statement on several occasions, that violence is not in the interest of the Afrikaners. And I have met him. I've had a lengthy discussion with him and other generals. And I am prepared to work with him on the basis that he means what he says. After all, you don't negotiate if you are not prepared to accept the integrity of those with whom you're negotiating. And I accept his integrity.
And the same thing for President F.W. de Klerk?
Well, I have repeatedly said, both inside and outside the country, that I accept his integrity as I accept the integrity of all political leaders with whom we are negotiating. There have been occasions when I did not think that he lived up to expectations. But nevertheless, destiny has put us in one country. And I cannot ignore him as the head of a government, however discredited and illegitimate it is. I must work with him in order to build a new South Africa.
Dr. Mandela, there are many people in your country who listen to those words and they say to you, here is a man who was in prison for 27 years, who has endured the loss of his comrades. yet at the same time he seems to have moved from being a powerful romantic hero and a powerful freedom fighter to being a political person willing to make deals.
I would hesitate to look at the matter from the point of view of an individual. We are essentially a collective, an organization which believes in teamwork. Even as I come to this interview, I exchange views with my colleagues, and they have an input in what I am going to say. And it would therefore be a serious mistake to regard me as separate from that noble and capable team of men and women who have led this organization during the almost 30 years.
Let me just stay with the notion of those who look at the work cut out for you and say the following things. One is he is caught now with the most incredible challenge of his life. He has to rebuild an economy, and he has to do it within a political environment that is almost pushing at him from both sides. On the right, he has the demands of conservatives in the National Party. On the left, he has the demands of people in the ANC who want to see certain demands met. And also there is Mr. Buthelezi, Chief Buthelezi, who's making the demands and making life difficult for you too. And they wonder how you can maneuver within these challenges.
Those who imagined that we would sail through these negotiations did not understand the dynamics of our political and economic situation. We have 26 different political parties with different backgrounds and pulling in different directions.
And represented on the Transition Council.
Nevertheless, we have been able to make impressive progress in spite of all the problems which you have identified. We rely on the power of negotiations, of dialogue, of sitting down to talk to one another.
Why do you
and we have made progress in that regard.
Why do you so believe in the power of negotiation?
Well, it is because that is now an academic question.
Because it's work.
Because through negotiations, we have been able to make solid advances which are visible to everybody. Our organization was banned for 30 years. It is now a legal organization. There was a state of emergency for 3 years in which civil liberties were suppressed. That state of emergency has been removed. There were hundreds of political prisoners in prison. They have been released. More than 15,000 political exiles were abroad. They have come back to the country. Repressive legislation is being repealed, and we have now scored what is a landmark in our political development: the installation of the Transitional Executive Council and the setting of the 27th of April 1994 as the date of elections. Now, when you look at this solid program, you have no alternative but to be optimistic about the future and to look at the problems which you have identified as a challenge to us, which we are meeting, because we are having discussions with the right wing. And as I have told you, they have made a statement together with our national chairperson, which a statement which is positive, creative, and which arouses the hope that the right wing will eventually will be able eventually to come to a settlement with the right wing. We are having discussions with Chief Buthelezi, and the same national chairperson briefed me yesterday. You want to see him.
He went to see Chief Buthelezi.
He went to see Chief Buthelezi on the basis of the briefing that our national chairperson has given me. Chief Buthelezi was conciliatory And he is prepared to go out with me to the unrest areas where the two of us will address our followers. Now, this means that we have to be very cautious in analyzing our situation and making conclusions. It is obvious, very clearly pessimistic, to think that because of the problems which you have identified, which really exist, that that is going to slow down the progress towards the greater South Africa which we are building.
What is your dream of South Africa? What kind of country, what kind of economy, what kind of vision does Dr. Mandela have for a country that he's given so much of his?
In answering this question, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that we are the only organization in South Africa, both inside and outside Parliament, which has developed over years a culture of democracy and commitment to a Bill of Rights. Our first Bill of Rights was issued in 1943, which it was a comment to the Atlantic Charter, which was concluded by President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill. We now have declared the type, explained the type of South Africa we're fighting for. A South Africa which is based on a Bill of Rights, which entails the right to vote for every South African, irrespective of his color or creed, the right to vote, the right of free speech and assemble, the right of movement, the right of property, the right of religious worship. Secondly, we have announced that we will establish an independent, impartial, non-racial, and non-sexist court of law to protect the rights which are set out in the Bill of Rights. We believe in a multi-party democracy where every political party will be able to canvass its point of view freely and without fear.
But you're going to have a new constitution.
We believe in regular elections. We believe in proportional representation, that every political party that polls more than 5% of the total votes cast in an election must be invited to serve on the government. All these are set out in the draft constitution, which we have presented to the multi-party negotiating forum.
And they will present an interim constitution.
We have agreed to that.
Before the election.
We have agreed to the adoption of an interim constitution. And we are taking safeguards to ensure that that constitution is interim.
I am told that you have taken a personal interest in the Constitution because of your own interest in South Africa, and secondly, because of your experience as a lawyer, and thirdly, because this is something that you've had years to think about.
Well, again, it would not be accurate to concentrate on an individual.
I know. And
we have our policy structures, and as part of those structures, I have an interest, the interest that you outline. But it's an interest of a man who is part of a powerful collective.
For the rest of this interview, I posit with you my understanding of collective leadership, so that you don't have to repeat that, because I appreciate that. But you must understand of how there is no question that you are the person that the ANC and your colleagues want to see as the president of South Africa after April 27th, 1994. There can be no doubt in your mind about that, however modest you are in giving credit to how many people.
Well, I will be prepared to serve in any position which my people want me to occupy.
You must have dreamed of a moment of being able to be president of South Africa. As modest as you are, as heroic as you are, with the integrity you have, you can't tell me that you haven't thought about that notion of what it would mean after all you've been through to be president.
Well, it makes one humble that so many people should have so much confidence in you as to prepare you for such a high office.
Do you worry about the expectation and the levels of expectation that are now clearly there? And people in townships who have suffered without hygiene and without plumbing and without education and without a job, and now they may expect too much of you, the ANC, and democracy.
Apartheid is indeed a crime against humanity, as the world body has said. There is no devastation to the people of any country which could surpass the damage which has been done both to our people as human beings and to the economy of the country.
What's it done
Our people are therefore entitled to have these high expectations, to believe that when they return from elections on the 27th of April next year, they'll find a decent house waiting for them. They'll find a job which ensures them an adequate income. They will have enough schools, enough medical care. They are entitled to that. But our duty as an organization is to warn them that these high expectations are unrealistic. It is going to take us years before we can be able to address their concerns, their needs, because these require consolidation of our political power, reorganization of various services like the civil service, the police and the army, and the mobilization of resources to enable us to address these needs. That is what we're doing.
Yeah. Clearly, you're going to need an enormous contribution in investment. You already have the elimination of sanctions. An enormous contribution in investment from the International Monetary Fund, from the United States, from Europe, from other people. And in addition, you're going to need an extraordinary sense of belief in the new government in order to deliver on the kinds of promises. With a 47% unemployment, with the loss of some $27 billion in investments that took place because of sanctions, it's a huge challenge.
What we have achieved in South Africa has been a challenge which many people believed it could never be attained.
But not Nelson Mandela.
Give him a chance. They believed that this would never be achieved. But we have achieved the impossible. For the National Party government, which has fought every election on the basis that they will never talk to the ANC because it's a terrorist organization, for them to swallow their words and their pride and to sit down and negotiate with us was something which many people believed would never happen. And the fact that so many political prisoners and exiles have been released and returned to the country, that repressive legislation is being repealed, that there is now in the greater part of South Africa free political activity, is something that was unimagined. But we have achieved it. Now we have an institution which is taking over already powers of government, and we have a day of liberation that has been fixed. Very few people indeed inside the country believed that we could rise to expectation and meet this challenge. Since we made this statement last Friday at the United Nations, lifting sanctions, the response that we have received from the United States of America, we have established history where the Congress, the American Congress, the Senate, decides within about 15 minutes after we have made the statement to recommend the lifting of sanctions. And we have received the support of the Commonwealth of Nations. We have received the support of the Organization of African Unity. Throughout the world, the response has been positive. I have had a discussion with the president of the IMF. He has been positive in his approach.
And what about private business? Those who have not invested, who pulled out their investment, who severed a relationship because of the policies of their country or their state, and they now look at South Africa and they say, I don't know. I don't know if I'm ready to invest in South Africa right now. There's a lot of violence. I don't understand exactly what direction it's going to take, and it scares me to death. What do you say to them?
We have no illusions as to the response that we are going to get from investors in actually investing in our country. You don't expect that shrewd businessmen are going to invest in our country simply because the president of the ANC has called for the lifting of sanctions. They want to ensure that their investments will be safe, that they will be able to repatriate their dividends and their profits. And therefore, they are going to wait for political stability in our country to be restored. And that political stability cannot be restored when violence is killing so many people. They are going to wait for us to have joint control of the security forces through the Transitional Executive Council. They are going to wait for a democratic government to be installed and to be settled. It is only after that, when we ourselves as South Africans have introduced an atmosphere of stability in our country, which will provoke investor confidence, that we can now judge whether the response is going to be as expected.
And if they say...
I have enjoyed the support of the business community. You must remember that that same day I addressed the United Nations, I addressed the Economic Development Conference in Washington. And the response of business was very positive indeed, as you'll have noticed from the press.
And they have, you're absolutely right, and they have nothing to worry about in terms of nationalization, in terms of some kind of reparations for past sins, and nothing to worry about in terms of what some call Marxist baggage.
Well, we are not discussing labels, and we're not going to be drawn into that type of debate. But what I can tell you is that in May last year, we issued an investment guide in order to remove the fear on the part of local and foreign investors to ensure that their properties will be safe, will not be confiscated, and as I have said, to ensure that their profits and dividends will be repatriated if they want to. We have that investment guide deals with precisely that question.
You spoke eloquently of the notion of how so many people never believed that they would see what they have seen in terms of what the National Party has done and in terms of the release of political prisoners and the return of people who had left the country. Did Nelson Mandela always believe that he would see April 27, 1994, that he would be released from prison, that he would see the ANC have the place that it has today?
I can talk to you about the expectations of the organization to which I belong,
But help me
and the comrades who shared these harsh experiences with me in prison. They believed that we would return.
in your lifetime, out of prison, you would get out of prison alive and you would have a chance to shape the destiny of your country and see all of your fellow
There is a statement.
Africans vote.
There is a statement which I issued in a meeting which was held in Soweto in the 80s, in which I expressly said, I will return. My youngest daughter read that statement. And, but again, I must caution, it must not be looked at from the point of view of an individual. This is an approach which I discussed with my colleagues, and I then issued my statement.
How difficult is it going to be for you not to have Oliver Tambo there, your friend and comrade? How difficult will it be not to have people who were with you but are now deceased?
I would have preferred not to deal with that question, and because a lifelong friend I highly respected is no more. And there are few men who have contributed towards the unity of our organization and raising it to a position of the most powerful political force in our country, both inside and outside Parliament. He should have been alive to see his efforts coming to fruition. We will miss his wisdom, his experience, but a comparatively young man has stepped into his shoes, Comrade Thabo Mbeki, who is one of the rising stars in the African National Congress. And we have no doubt that he will be able to acquit himself so well that he will close the gap which has been created by the death of Comrade Oliver Tambo.
When you think about Mbeki, Govan Mbeki and Oliver Tambo, and you think about Walter Sisulu, and you think about so many people that were part of the struggle with you, just because of the audience here in America who has not heard you speak about this, to my knowledge, in this kind of conversational forum, help us understand what it was like for you, and how does a man maintain his strength, his belief, his integrity on an island where he's been sentenced to life in prison?
Well, there is nothing as inspiring as to know that the ideas for which you have sacrificed will triumph in the end. One of the things that we were consciously aware of throughout, 24 hours a day, was the fact that the ideas of liberation were much alive, that our people inside the country were on their feet and fighting back, that the international community, irrespective of the government that was in power in a country, whether it was liberal or conservative, fully supported our struggle. That was a source of tremendous inspiration, and it kept the morale of all of us very high. And therefore, we were very strengthened inside prison because of the knowledge that our incarceration was not in vain, and that the possibility of us coming back to play our part as part of a greater team of freedom fighters was always rosy possible. And this sustained us. And also to share these experiences with the men who were with me in prison, some of whom you have cited, was a tremendous experience.
How about your sanity in prison? And I mean that with the greatest
Yes,
respect. The garden, what was that for you, having your garden? Give us a sense of being in prison with the goals that you had, with the values you had, with the inspiration of the fight underway by those outside of prison and the battles to come. What did a small thing like a garden mean for you?
Well, there were moments when one doubted whether he had done the correct thing by abandoning your wife, your children, and literally throwing them to the wolves. That was a cause of constant concern on my part, to see my wife humiliated, hounded by the security police from job to job, threatening employers and forcing them to dismiss my wife. My children, being babies, being hounded when they went to a colored school or Indian school, and the authorities compelled to dismiss them so that they could go to an African school. And the fact that I was not there to protect my family, to guide my children.
It's a terrible pain.
But a terrible pain indeed. But after agonizing over this, in the end, I nevertheless felt that I had done the right thing, and that if I was released and again had the opportunity to do what I did, I would do it again. And but of course, it was necessary for us to occupy ourselves during the day, to do the type of things that you liked. Reading.
What did you read?
Studying, and of course doing gardening, creating life, see it grow and maturing, and to beautiful vegetables. That was an experience, which elevated one. And as far as reading is concerned, I liked reading political works, biographies, and novels. I like to enjoy them.
Yeah. Let me come back to the garden first before I go to the books. With respect to the garden, were you good at it?
Well, I was a student, and at college,
yes,
it was a task of the students to go and work in some garden for your members of the staff. And I was fortunate enough to be able to work for members of the staff who had gardens. And I looked after their gardens. And in any case, when I was in jail now, I had the opportunity to read works on gardening and other publications dealing with farming. And I became, therefore, quite informed as far as farming is concerned.
But primarily for vegetables?
Primarily for vegetables.
And what vegetables?
Well, I had a wide variety of vegetables like tomatoes,
yes,
spinach,
yes,
onion.
Could you eat them? They allowed you to keep them and eat them?
Yes, beetroot,
yes,
egg fruit, and strawberries.
wow.
And I tried peanuts, but I was not successful.
Why not?
Well, I didn't have, the technique.
Yeah.
Of planting them and cultivating them.
But you had fertilizer and you had all the things that you needed to do.
No, I had enough.
Did boxing make a difference, the fact that you had been an amateur boxer?
Well, I liked boxing. It taught me discipline.
Well, boy, that's what you need.
It taught me discipline, how to go forward and how to retreat when the opposition is so strong that I could not overcome it, and how to flank problems.
These sounds like the lessons of either political or military warfare. When to flank, when to watch your flank, when to go forward, when to retreat, when to go on the offensive, when to go on the defensive, when to negotiate.
These are the basic principles of boxing as a sport.
Yeah.
You must, even before you actually don the gloves, you must be taught the basic rules of the game. And to be able to advance, to go forward, when you feel that you're in top, you see, and you can put out your enemy, your opponent, you must do so. But when in fighting, your rival is superior, you stay out and you keep him away. And you circle around and you concentrate on body punches and wear him down. And you have to study your enemy even before you go to the ring. But even more important, study him in the ring. And don't take things for granted.
And don't take your eyes off of where his hands are.
Well, absolutely. You must concentrate. So what I've said are the basic rules of this sport. Of course, they will also be the basic rule of the military and so on.
And so therefore, what is your posture now in terms of offensive, defensive? Do you obviously have defeated your opponent, or are you in the 13th round or the 14th round? Where are you using the boxing metaphor?
No, we are negotiating. And when you are negotiating in regard to building a country, you are not thinking of victory.
Victory, no victory.
You are not thinking of victory for yourself.
Yes.
You don't want your opponent to be a loser. You are thinking of a victory for the people as a whole. South Africans must be the victors, not the ANC, not the leader of the ANC, but the people of South Africa. And therefore, I would hesitate to see any political party weakened. I want all the political parties involved in negotiations to be strong so as to bring their constituencies to the negotiation forum, and so that we could speak with one voice on the fundamental question of building a new South Africa. You don't, in negotiation, seek the type of victory which you seek in a boxing match.
Do you love your country more than you love anything?
Well, that is difficult. I've got a family, I've got children.
Yeah, but it's
And
almost
it's
like you're married to your country,
it's
and
inconceivable.
destiny has made this marriage, and you have no choice.
It's inconceivable for me to love anybody more than my children and my grandchildren. In fact, that is what they are saying to me today. My daughter now and again says, I grew up without a father. My father was in prison. But I entertain the hope throughout that one day he will come back and I will have a father like all other children. I'll stop being an orphan during my father's lifetime. But my father came out. He has now become the father of my nation. I still have no father. I've got a grandson who is 4, who turned 4 in September. I asked him on his birthday, what do you want me to buy for you? He said, I want a motor car. I said, let's go to the shops. We went. We got out of the car. He was holding my hand, my left hand. And we went to the shop which sells motor cars. But as we walked in, crowds milled round and they shook my hands. Now, he left this hand and came to grab this hand. So I said to him, well, can you hold this hand? He said, no. He held his hand because he saw me greeting other people with his hand. I stopped being his grandfather. I was now a grandfather of so many people he did not know. He was so upset that even when we entered the shop with vehicles, with motors, he was no longer interested. That is the type of experience we're having. A grandfather who is a grandfather not of my grandchild, but of the people around. It's a very painful experience, but nevertheless, we have to commit ourselves completely to the organization and to try to hope that your children and grandchildren will understand.
So the biggest pain for you has been for those children you didn't have time for, and now your family is as large as a nation.
That is correct. And this is an experience, of course, which affects thousands of freedom fighters, not only in the African National Congress, but in other formations, political formations as well.
Is it hard not to have a wife with you?
Well, to be with your wife is a tremendous source of confidence and inspiration. But we have to adjust to the situation.
How painful was it?
Well, I would prefer to talk very little about domestic matters. But she is a woman who supported me when hard times were knocking at my door. And one of the difficult decisions to make was to leave the joint household and to go and establish myself elsewhere.
Difficult because of the sacrifices she had made during your imprisonment?
I would repeat that I would prefer that would leave personal issues aside. But it is correct that she supported me very strongly when I was in prison.
Just one last question on that, because it is such an issue. How do you view her today?
Well, she is entitled to have her own political views.
Which is?
Whatever views she has, she is entitled. And once we accept the democratic process, we must accept its full implications. People are entitled to have their own views, whatever I think of them.
You have, at this moment, no reservation or indecision, along with the counsel you've taken with your colleagues, that the decisions made by you and them are right for South Africa? The sacrifices, the toll, the price you've paid, the blood that's been spilled was necessary, painful, but necessary. Yes?
Absolutely. We are an organization which, from its foundation, committed itself to building a nation and through peaceful, non-violent, and disciplined struggle. We were forced to resort to arms by the regime. And the lesson of history is that the masses of the people, the method of political action which they use, are determined by the oppressor himself. if the oppressor uses peaceful means, the oppressed would never resort to violence. It is when the oppressor, in addition to its repressive policies, uses violence, that the oppressed have no alternative but to retaliate by similar forms of action. And therefore, the pains, the blood that was spilled, the responsibility for that lies squarely on the shoulders of the regime.
Yeah. But not at the same time, you and the ANC has forthrightly acknowledged violence that existed in ANC camps as well.
We are perhaps the only organization, certainly in Africa and possible throughout the world, that has had the courage and the honesty to take the public into confidence.
That's true.
To say, we set up an international commission composed of a former American judge, a distinguished lawyer from Zimbabwe, and a prominent businessman in South Africa who was trained in the United States here. We set up that independent commission because we wanted to get to the bottom of this affair. And when they gave their report, made their finding and recommendations, we took that and to the public and said to them, these are the findings of the commission. These are their recommendations. Hardly any organization in our country has done that. Mr. de Klerk appointed a commission to investigate allegations by Judge Goldstone, who has been appointed to deal with the question of violence. When that report reached him, he did not have the courage to publish it, to take the public into confidence. He suppressed it. We have done something totally different.
You certainly have. Let me just end with this, because they've told me I have to cut, and I'll leave with this one last notion. April 27th, 1994, free elections. Black Africans in South Africa will express for the first time their political will. Will that be the happiest day of your life?
Yes and no. Yes, because as I have already said, that is a day of liberation.
Yes.
When the people of South Africa will be able to elect a government of their own choice, when they will take their destiny into their hands and be able to run their own lives. No, because it may well be that it is going to be more difficult to maintain a democracy than it was to bring it into reality. There are going to be very awesome challenges, and which are going to tax the ability of those who are leading the democratic process in this country.
Including you. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Pleasure to have this opportunity to talk to you. Dr. Nelson Mandela, thank you for joining our broadcast this evening. One of the historic figures of the latter part of the 20th century. See you next time.